Bruh.
Hey yo, peace family. Welcome back to Flesh of the Gods.
Well, isn't this a nice surprise?
Fellow Cincinnatian, our city has been overwhelmed with sorrow. Tragedy has visited too many doorsteps, and the heartbreak in our neighborhoods is real. Violent and senseless acts have taken lives, shattered families, and left all of us asking, why? As you watch this message, I want you to remember the names of those we have lost, lives stolen without warning, without reason, and without the chance to say goodbye. Please join me in remembering
Ryan Hinton.
So apparently, Hamilton County prosecutor Connie Pillage has found that the Ryan Hinton shooting was justified. We got that coming up, and also we have his mother. She speaks out about how she feels about the whole thing. But before that, let's hear the response of the family's lawyer.
My name is Fanon Rucker. I am one of the members of the Cochran Firm legal team that represents Ryan Hinton. Members of his family who just heard some devastating news are standing here to discuss what we heard today. You know, I'll offer first of all that justice comes in many forms. One of the things that we did not see today was justice coming from the criminal justice system. But justice is still going to be obtained, and we're here to ensure that that is the case. What I heard from our prosecutor today was a word that confuses and astounds, but doesn't surprise me. And that is justified. The prosecutor said that she ruled that this was a justified shooting. But what have we not seen? Didn't see it today. Haven't seen it since May 1st. A gun in a young man's hand as he was running away from someone who was not even in uniform standing to his side shooting at him. We saw today in a press conference slow down shots to justify what our eyes didn't tell us we saw. How was that justified? What we saw in the press conference today was conversation about a young man who with his friends were somewhere in Kentucky beforehand and what he was wearing at another time. What have we heard about the officer whose words we're taking as credible in this instance? All I heard were letters referring to people's names, including someone who took the life of another person. Justified? That's not our position. And that's certainly not the family's position.
So what up, family? I'm gonna pull it up later, but they using that Marcy's law, saying that's why they not showing the police officers' names. But that don't go for that. Marcy's law is for victims, so that don't add up, family. Appreciate y'all being here. Appreciate you tapping in. What up, tat, tat, tat?
What we know is when we talk about our court system, the most important piece when it comes to obtaining justice is the credibility of those involved. Credibility comes when we look at physical evidence like videos and still shots and body-worn camera. Credibility is established when you look at the records of those who are giving statements. What is the record of the primary officer here who pulled the trigger and shot, as the chief said, in the chest when we know it wasn't the chest, it was the side? What is that officer's background? We know it. And we know his jacket with the Citizens Complaint Authority and with internal investigations is not empty. And we ask the question, why is his word the credible word that the prosecutor's office is willing to take in such a serious matter? We don't think it should be. And we express to you today that justice will be obtained. Two of the things that we want to press today about what the prosecutor did. First of all, we obviously disagree with the idea that this was justified. Second of all, there are neighboring jurisdictions who take every serious police case, shooting, homicide, to the grand jury, to let citizens look at the evidence and make a decision whether charges are appropriate. For the prosecutor's office to unilaterally decide based on the reading of the facts and based on the reading of the law that they shouldn't even present this should have been presented to the grand jury. In 2020, after George Floyd was murdered.
That makes sense right there, because how is the prosecutor going to just sit there and just make a ruling? Like, she basically about to do her own court hearing in front of everybody. We gonna see it. She already made her ruling and found that he was not, that it was justified. That's crazy.
Governor DeWine proposed several amendments to our state law policies. One of those state law policies that with serious shootings or homicides involving police officers, that an independent body be the investigating, not the entity that was at the source of the shooting itself. We believe that those ought to be the policies that our office in this county ascribes to. Transparency, trust, a system that people believe in. That's what helps to get there. But unilaterally deciding that this is justified and that this shouldn't even go to the grand jury, that doesn't feel like justice. And it certainly doesn't feel to this family like this was justified. We will, in the coming weeks, be presenting our argument to the courts. And even though a group of citizens didn't have the opportunity in that building to decide whether criminal charges should be filed, we believe that a group of citizens should be the ones to make the determination of whether or not, in the eyes of the civil courts, that the tragic death of young Ryan Hinton was not justified. And we intend to advocate for that position as loudly, as strongly, and as intentionally as we can. I believe there's one voice that would like to be heard. Since it's raining, I'll ask him to come on up quickly. You do want to. This is the voice that you've heard before. This is Ryan Hinton's brother, cousin. That's what I said. It's his cousin. He's been at the other press conferences, and he does have a brief word that he'd like to offer.
Yeah, I just, like I said, like he said, I'm his cousin. I'm Marlon. Ryan, my little cousin. I just want to say, Ryan, we miss you. We love you down here. We all miss you and love you, man. Like, what do you know, bro? I just want to say, the prosecutor, whatever she said or what all she said, I just feel like was a complete joke. I mean, we all seen Ryan running, man. How can you be threatened by somebody running? I don't understand it. But yeah, I ain't gonna really say too much. I just want to tell my cousin I miss him, man. That's all.
Mr. Rucker, you implied that you know the officer's name, and talk more about how do you know that his jacket has some marks?
We've been investigating this case since May the 1st. We have access to a lot of information that has not been made public. In fact, all I heard today was letters referring to police officers' names. We know the names, and we know their histories, and we know that their credibility should not be accepted simply because they made statements, this one in particular, about what happened. And we intend to put that before a group of citizens who can help to make that determination, because credibility is extremely important.
You reference the courts, or you apply, will there be a civil suit, or how do you approach
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely.
Fanon, there was a period during the press conference where Pillage went over the criminal activity leading up to this event. What do you make of that description? A rash of thefts in northern Kentucky.
Yeah. What I make of that is that that's information. What we were talking about today is whether the officer was justified in the moment that he pulled the trigger and pulling the trigger. So the question is not what was going on in the last century, last week, an hour before, the day before, but what was going on at the time. He had no idea about any of that stuff. So why was it relevant to castigate and to denigrate this young man in this press conference today? Because it had nothing to do with the officer's decision.
And on the note of justification, there's a difference between, of course, criminal liability and civil liability. Tell me why you think that somebody could be civilly liable in this case.
O.J. Simpson. That's the example I use all the time. O.J. Simpson was found not guilty in a criminal trial for the killing of his wife and her boyfriend, but he was found civilly liable for the same exact acts in the court of law. Because the standard in criminal law, and I appreciate this because I was a prosecutor and a judge, the criminal standard is like this. It's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest standard we have in our criminal justice system. In civil court, the standard is like this. It's 51% to 49%. It's more likely than not. And in the court system across the street, it's not even a unanimous verdict that's required to find that a person is liable under those circumstances. So I give people the example of O.J. Simpson. He was found not guilty, but he was found liable for the same exact acts.
When will you be filing?
Soon.
Did you mention that you believe the officer who fired the shots was not in uniform?
That's correct. These were, and the chief admitted it in a prior conversation, that he was not in uniform, that he was actually in non-uniform. He was an undercover officer with, as my understanding, with the...
Yeah, we saw that. He had the blue jeans on with the black tee.
Particular unit that has its task of being a bit more aggressive in their apprehension of individuals.
What do you believe a judge or jury will see this as a case that will cause it to...
I think they'll see the law. I think they'll also see the standard that's required, and that's more likely than not that this was wrongful act, and we think that the outcome will be what justice requires. That's what we believe.
Can you spell Marlon's name for us, please?
Marlon?
M-A-R-L-Y-N.
Thank you.
Same last name?
Howard.
Thank you.
And Mr. Rucker, real quickly, you may have said this, and I'm sorry that I didn't quite catch it. Is it correct to say you would have preferred she had taken this case to the grand jury, and can you discuss whether that's true or not? Or I'm sorry, I don't mean to put words in.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Why?
Well, whenever we have serious incidences involving the police and
Grand jury question. I'm sorry.
yeah, the grand jury. So again, they're neighboring counties that's their policy. That anytime there is a critical incident involving law enforcement and citizens, it's taken to the grand jury. Let a group of citizens, voting citizens who are registered to vote, receive the information, take a look at the evidence, understand what the law is, and let them make the decision whether or not charges are appropriate with the appropriate instruction. It's more transparent. It's cleaner. It helps to build trust, and I think it's a great policy. And she indicated that she considered that, but she just thinks that she moves differently. I won't be critical of our prosecutor in this role that she's in. As we know that she was recently elected to this role. But the finer actions of neighboring jurisdictions should be strongly considered and should be taken, especially when they help promote transparency and trust in the system that people don't always trust or believe is transparent.
You talked about her recently being elected to this position. Do you feel...
Like, obviously, we know y'all all work together. How you gonna be the one to decide if you prosecuting or not? We know y'all working together. Of course, y'all not gonna go against your own. And we need a grand jury to decide this stuff.
This move not to bring it to a grand jury was a political one?
I won't dig into the mind of our prosecutor. As someone, I've known her since law school. I think that she has good intentions and good purpose in what she does as our prosecutor. So I won't suggest that any decision that's been made in any of these cases was about politics. What I will suggest is that best practices, and as you all know, I was in the running for that position, and so I looked at a bunch of different policies that our office would run much more smoothly, and I think that that's one that would help to build transparency and trust in the system if all of those types of cases went to the grand jury before a group of citizens. A jury is a group of citizens, so let's take it to the grand jury and let the citizens decide. At least then we won't be complaining about the fact that a single person made the decision that this was justified.
Can you tell us today the specific
I cannot. I mean, I know them, but I'm not going to do that here. I'll leave that for the lawsuit.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
To their families, mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, children, siblings, and loved one, you have my deepest, heartfelt condolences. We mourn with you. We feel your loss deeply. And to every family in our city grieving a loved one taken by homicidal violence, please know this: you are not alone. Your Cincinnati Police Department stands with you in both grief and action. Our pursuit of justice for your loved ones is unwavering. My team and I work tirelessly every day, analyzing data, reviewing intelligence, identifying patterns, doing all we can to be proactive and prevent violence before it happens. But the truth is painful. What we can do and will do is continue to serve as a barrier between good and evil. Let me be clear. Your Cincinnati Police Department will not stop. We will not back down from protecting our neighborhoods and standing up for what is right. And while my words cannot ease the pain we all feel, I want to reaffirm there is nothing more heartbreaking than watching our officers respond from call to call, trying to make a difference, only to witness yet another life lost, another family torn apart, another business harmed. Still, we press on, and we will continue to show up.
May 1st.
Long live Ryan Hinton. What up, Lady L? I see you. Appreciate you joining. What up, Chan? My Black is golden in the house. I see you. Appreciate you. Jazzy T. What up? What up, though? Appreciate y'all. Keep it rolling.
2025.
So
Officer involved shooting.
This is the prosecutor that's basically said that he was justified. This is it right here, the whole thing.
Death of Ryan Hinton. Throughout this press conference, I will not reveal the officer's name because Marcy's law precludes me from doing so.
So check this out real quick. They keep on talking about this Marcy's Law thing, right? And saying they can't say the cop's name because of Marcy's Law. Marcy's Law, also known as the Ohio Crime Victims Bill of Rights, is a constitutional amendment in Ohio that expands the rights of crime victims. It was passed in November 2017 with overwhelming support from the Ohio voters. So this is for victims. How is the officer that shot somebody a victim? How is his name protected under Marcy's Law? He's not a victim. How does that make sense? Why they keep saying that?
I instead will refer to him as Officer A. And in fact, I do mention a total of 4 officers in this presentation. And just to keep it easy for you, I'm going to call them Officer A, Officer B, Officer C, and Officer D. This incident happened over 6 weeks ago. And I know that many may prefer quick decisions, but that does not serve justice. My office and I must evaluate these situations on a case-by-case basis. That alone dictates how long the review takes. And justice requires that my office and I conduct a thorough review of all the evidence of the case in an objective manner, free from preconceptions or outside interference, and that the decision is compliant with the law and not with emotion. We received the final forensics report recently, and we finalized our review just yesterday, so I immediately called a press conference to give you the results. And I'm confident that my decision was based on every fact available and was made with due diligence and the utmost care. The officer-involved shooting on May 1st, 2025, from my review, I have determined that Officer A was legally justified in his use of force on that day. I want to thank my staff for the rigor, time, talent, and tremendous scrutiny they employed during this review. I did not send this to the grand jury, but instead I made my decision based on the review and recommendation of my senior staff. And let's be clear about this. I am the only person responsible for this decision. I assure you that I take this responsibility seriously, as I do every aspect of my job. Just moments ago, I notified the chief of police, city leadership, and
how the heck is she the only person responsible to make the decision about this case, about them shooting? That don't make no sense. How can they even have that as part of their law? They need to change that for real.
Lawyers for the Hinton family and the FOP. And before we move forward, I just want to give you a little outline of what you're going to see and hear in this presentation. I'm first going to tell you what the role of my office is in making such decisions, and then I'm going to give you an overview of the law involved. After that, I'll walk you through the events leading up to the incident. We're going to talk a little bit about Ryan Hinton's gun, and then talk about the incident itself. And I will conclude with my legal analysis. We will review, in some cases, the evidence second by second, and in some cases down to 1/100th of a second.
And in all that reviewing, nowhere do you see him pointing the gun at the officer.
The first step is to understand what the prosecutor's role is in a situation like this. My job is to evaluate whether the officer's use of force against Ryan Hinton was justified and to determine whether there are grounds to bring criminal charges against the officer for murder. And to do this, we have to perform a Fourth Amendment. There are grounds to bring criminal charges against the officer for murder. And to do this, we have to perform a Fourth Amendment analysis. We're guided by the United States Supreme Court in how we handle this. The use of force must be objectively reasonable under the totality of the circumstances. To determine what is objective, we just use the ordinary dictionary definition, meaning to not be influenced by personal feelings or opinion, and to rely on verifiable information based on the facts. And the facts and circumstances are those that are then known to the officer in the situation. So the question we present ourselves is, and the Supreme Court again directs us to answer this, whether deadly force deployed by the officer was justified from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene. This means we take into account the interests of both the individual and the government at stake. The second part of this equation is the totality of the circumstances. And when we talk about that, that means we have to look at all the relevant circumstances, including the facts prior to and leading up to the event of the incident. And there's no
Okay, let me clear something up. Shout out to Chloe. She sent me the link. It actually does cover defendants. It does cover defendants, so I was wrong. I admit that. What up, Chloe? Appreciate you joining. Appreciate you dropping that link.
no time limit into how far we can look back, because prior events may show why a reasonable officer might perceive some otherwise ambiguous conduct to be a threat. And again, the required perspective is that of a reasonable officer at the scene. We have to stand in the officer's shoes, perceive what the officer then perceived, and acted within the limits of the officer's knowledge and information as it then existed.
It says police officers' names should be sealed or covered up as crime victims. They consider them as crime victims. It's being challenged. It wasn't meant to protect the government actor. Right.
So you now know my role. You know the standards for review as directed by the Supreme Court. I'd like to move on to the events leading up to the incident. And we're going to start with the early morning hours of May 1st, 2025. 4 young men, Sincere Grigsby, Jarrell Austin, DeAnthony Bullocks, and Ryan Hinton, went to northern Kentucky in a stolen Kia Optima, looking for cars and other valuables to steal. And we see evidence of this from the surveillance video provided to us by the Boone County Sheriff. The car with the headlights on holds the 4 young men, and you'll see them getting out.
So this is not the car they was in on the scene. This is a different car. But how can they say that this is him? How do they know for sure this is him?
You'll see Ryan Hinton walk over. There he is, right by the white car on the right. You can see his jacket that had some white on the front. This is Bullocks coming to this white vehicle in the foreground, and that's Austin in the back.
obviously couldn't see nobody's face right there. You couldn't tell his face. They just went and grabbed any clip and be like, yeah, that's him. How did they confirm that was him? And what do that got to do with the police shooting him? That's two different things. Why are you even showing this? What this got to do with the police shooting? Trying to make him look like a bad guy to say it was justified?
Watch how softly he closes the door. And he's wearing a yellow or white hoodie, sweatshirt. He's got a mask on, but we'll see him in that same outfit later in this presentation.
He had a mask on.
And I think he runs across the street here to find another vehicle and to try to find another one that's unlocked.
She said he had a mask on. How you know that was him if he had a mask on? Because he had an outfit that looked like that?
The 4 men returned to Ohio and were found in this vehicle, which was reported stolen in northern Kentucky in the wee hours of May 1st, 2025. They moved it into, they drove it into this parking lot off of Warsaw Avenue. The entrance to the parking lot is up a very steep hill. It goes around the back of an apartment complex. They're parked by the woods. It's a pretty secluded spot. And as many of you already know, in cases of officer-involved shootings, CPD, the Cincinnati Police Department, immediately separates any officer involved or a witness to the incident. This is so that they can interview them later at the station. Officer D was the first on the scene, and in the statement he made to police later that day, he told detectives what he saw. He was investigating a stolen vehicle, a 2021 Telluride, which we showed. He saw it in the back of the parking lot. He saw at least one person inside. He backed out of the parking lot so he could confer with the other officers who were responding. When there's someone in a vehicle, you got to have a good plan on how to approach it. And
So that was a good plan, to get out and shoot within 6 seconds? That was their good plan?
By the time he returned, the occupants had already started running, and then he heard the shots. Officer B was the next to the scene. He sort of led the group that was responding en masse to the vehicle there. He was the first one there in this rotation. And you'll see his dash cam video in a moment. As he approached, he saw the driver, Grigsby, bail out and run towards a wooded area. And then he saw Hinton as the second one out. Hinton went a different path. He ran across what looks like a concrete pavement. Officer B saw Hinton stumble and fall. He heard the sound of metal against that pavement. He heard officers warn them that Hinton had a gun. Now we're going to watch Officer B's dash cam video. Please note that it takes something like 30 seconds for the audio to click in. That's just how the machine is designed. And there's a Telluride. He blocks it in. There goes Grigsby. There goes Hinton, running a different direction. And there went Austin and Bullocks. Next, we're going to listen to the audio so that you won't be distracted by the video. You can listen to the audio. This is Officer B, his dash cam audio. And again, it might take some seconds to click in. Different direction. Next, we're going to listen to the
this a nice surprise?
I don't know about you, but I found it very easy to hear the alert, he's got a gun.
So, all right, never mind.
Cincinnati police also interviewed multiple non-law enforcement witnesses. This was one of the men inside the car. He said, hey, when I woke up, one of these other three said, police. The police said, freeze, get down. And the witness said, I ran.
So now one of them is the witnesses now too. They got them as a witness for the state, one of the ones that ran.
He did again say in his interview, police did say freeze. And I heard the police officer say, somebody got a gun, they got a gun, he got a gun. This is one of the witnesses from the vehicle. Clearly the suspects disregarded the officer's commands because we saw them all running in one of those videos. But most importantly here, another important aspect is the witness was asked about Hinton's gun. And he said,
She's a prosecutor though. When have you ever seen a prosecutor explaining away the prosecution? Like, this is why we're not going to prosecute. Like, who does that?
It had a long clip and it was kind of brown or tan in color. Not the most common, perhaps. So we've gone over the events leading up to the incident, and before we review the incident, I wish to talk about Ryan Hinton's gun. It was a gun recovered at the scene, and it belonged to Ryan Hinton and was carried by him during the incident. Through investigation, Hinton's cell phone was recovered and photos were found on his cell phone. This is a picture of Ryan Hinton taken on April 28, 2025. He's posing with two guns, one of which is the one he was carrying at the scene and which was described by one of the men in the vehicle. It's unique in color, tan with a black top. Another photo taken on April 28th shows Hinton with the same gun he had at the scene. Hinton's also wearing the jacket he was wearing at the scene. And in that first video from Boone County, there were a couple of frames where you could see the white of the jacket. And this is the gun we found at the scene. Video from Boone County.
That was not the same jacket he had on. That's why she separated it so far apart. You can see that white. That is not the same damn jacket on. That's obviously a two-color jacket.
There were a couple of frames where you could see the white of the jacket. And this is the gun we found at the scene. Tan with a long clip and a black top. Let's now look at the incident. Look, you're going to see some body-worn camera video. You're going to see some still shots. These add to the evidence that we reviewed already. And obviously, body-worn cam and dash cam, that's important evidence in any investigation, but it's not the only evidence we look at. We look at officers' statements, we listen to what they say, and we look at the objective evidence we can find at the scene. So, first of all, Officer C, this is from the statement he gave to police after the incident. He responded to the scene because of a report of a stolen vehicle. He approached the stolen vehicle and the occupants began running. We saw them all begin running in the video cam. Officer C saw the gun in Hinton's hand and...
Hold on. I went and looked at the thing. Heck no, that's not the same outfit. I might have to restart this. Where we at? 32. All right, hold on. I got to show y'all this real quick, family. Hold on.
Verbally alerted vehicle. This is from evidence that we at the incident.
Hold on. She lying? Look at that jacket. It's the jacket she said.
A yellow or white hoodie sweatshirt as it then exists. that's Austin in the back. You can see his jacket that had some white on the front. This is bullocks coming to this white vehicle in the foreground.
Look at that jacket. That is not the same jacket, family. What?
And that's Austin.
What?
Posing with two guns, one of which is the one he was carrying at the scene and which was described by one of the men in the vehicle. It's unique in color, tan with a black top. Another photo taken on April 28th.
That is not the same jacket.
Shows Hinton with the same gun he had at the scene. Hinton's also wearing the jacket he was wearing at the scene. And in that first video from Boone County, there were a couple of frames where you could see the white of the jacket. And this is the gun we found at the scene.
You just gonna sit there and lie in front of everybody? That's why they separated it like that. That's crazy.
The truth is that you are a liar.
Tan with a long clip and a black top. Let's now look at the incident. Look, you're going to see some body-worn camera video. You're going to see some still shots. These add to the evidence that we reviewed already. And obviously, body-worn cam and dash cam, that's important evidence in any investigation, but it's not the only evidence we look at. We look at officers' statements, we listen to what they say, and we look at the objective evidence we can find at the scene. So, first of all, Officer C, this is from the statement he gave to police after the incident. He responded to the scene because of a report of a stolen vehicle. He approached the stolen vehicle and the occupants began running. We saw them all begin running in the video cam. Officer...
What up, though, Steph JK? Appreciate you joining. Member for 7 months. Appreciate that, family.
Officer C saw the gun in Hinton's hand and verbally alerted others that he had a gun. Officer A, this is the officer in question, he again responded because of the report of a stolen vehicle. Joining other officers who were already at the scene, he began by chasing Grigsby towards the wooded area. Officer A reported that he heard the warning about the gun, that he saw Hinton point a gun at him, and he then fired his service weapon. He said, "I thought I better get my gun out and shoot him before he shoots me, and I fired before he could fire on me." Before we get into the visuals, we're going to listen to the audio from Officer A's body-worn camera. Again, it may take a few seconds for the audio portion to begin, but you will hear Officer A gasp and say, "Gun," before firing his weapon.
Man, that's murder. A few seconds, I might as well get my gun out and shoot him before he shoots me. What?
We learned that not long after the shots were fired, Officer A told the other officers there that Hinton had pointed a gun at him. And before we get into the next set of slides, I want you to know that these are still shots from Officer A's body-worn camera. And because the incident happened in less than 4 seconds, we wanted to show you some shorter snapshots of time. We just thought it was prudent to show you some single frames. And then look, it was a tremendous amount of work to go through these videos frame by frame, second by second, 1/100th of a second by 1/100th of a second. And keep in mind also that these body-worn cameras use a wide-angle lens, so it can create a sort of distorted fishbowl optical effect.
Still don't explain why we don't see no gun in the video, though.
And that can make it difficult for us to ascertain spatial details. And something we noted from these still shots. We're going to begin by showing that Officer A did not remove his firearm. You're going to see his right hand several times in those split 1/100ths of a second frames. You're going to see that he ran quite a way without even pulling on his holster. And it wasn't until the direct threat of Hinton with a gun that he acted. You're also going to see, and I'll point this out, that after falling and upon regaining his balance, Hinton makes the decision to pick up his gun and continue to run from officers right between some commercial dumpsters with the gun in his right hand. And it isn't until Officer A rounds the front of the left dumpster that he begins to remove his service firearm. At the same time, Hinton pops out, surprising him. There's his right hand. There's his right hand again. And in the distance, you see Hinton where he's fallen. And now he's reaching for the gun. The right hand is still empty. And he's still running after Grigsby at this point. Coming around the dumpster, this is the very first possible time he could have seen Hinton. And that's when he pulls out his gun. Can you stop it right there? So he's getting his gun ready. He will eventually have it in two hands. But you can see Hinton coming through. He's still between the dumpsters. But it's at this time, we can't see it because of the weapon in our viewpoint. This is certainly when Officer A knows that there's a weapon involved. Next slide.
So the only chance we would have had to see the gun, we don't see the gun because his weapon is in the view. What about here? Do you see the gun here?
And this is where
What about here?
we see him running with the gun. You can see he's got that same sweatshirt on that we saw in the picture of him posing with two weapons.
Where's him pointing the gun at the officer like you saying happened?
And this is the unfortunate moment when the first shot was fired. Based on the position of the body-worn camera, you can see Officer A was directly to the left of Hinton. They were probably 10 feet from each other. The angle of this shot was corroborated from the coroner in her report that Hinton was shot directly from the left side of his chest. And I want to show you a picture of the gun at the scene. Now this is taken with a regular camera, so it's a little bit easier for our eyes to understand it. I'm going to point to a couple of things on the frame. Those parts of the...
They had to show that because remember the other officer showed them other scratches on the other side of the gun and said she believed that's where he dropped it.
The black metal part appear to be scuffed.
The chief.
Could be from when he dropped the gun on the ground, on the concrete. Next one. So this is CIS taking pictures at the scene. They recovered the weapon. They're holding the extended magazine in one hand. You can see there's a bullet in the chamber ready to be fired. This is the extended magazine that was found. I'm going to point out something to you here. Each of those holes you see are numbered so that you can easily ascertain how many bullets are in and how many you have left. This clip holds 22 bullets.
22 in the clip.
And recovered at the scene, including the bullet in the chamber, were 23 bullets. Some more regular camera shots. I'm going to point out a few things here. Remember, this is not a wide-angle lens, so it's a better reflection of the actual situation and the layout of the scene and the dimensions, the details, the depths. First of all, you can see 2 police vehicles. You can see at least 2 dumpsters. There's at least one more behind one of the left one. And these are just regular commercial dumpsters. They're probably the width of this doorway, sitting next to each other. And let me point out 3 things.
Do everything in threes, huh?
So I pointed to the concrete pavement where Hinton fell and decided to pick up his weapon, the space between the dumpsters through which he ran, and a tree that's right behind the dumpster that's on our right. You can see that this is not a huge space. We can see the tree right here. We're going to get a better angle in a minute. But the tree is kind of in the middle of what's now the left-hand dumpster to our view. Hinton ran on the other side of it. And here, another view from in front of the other dumpster. I'm going to point out 3 things to you again. And when I said 3 things, I meant 4. So you can see the tree in the foreground. It's right there next to the dumpster. We saw that from the view of the 2 police vehicles, and we saw the tree right behind the dumpster that's now on our left. Then I pointed to evidence placard 6. This is where Hinton was when he was shot. Evidence placard 7, which is pretty much obscured by the grass there, that is where we found the casing from Officer A's gun for that first shot. And that dirty area, ungrassed area that I pointed to, that's where we believe the officer was standing when he made the shot, based on where we found the cartridge. Hinton was only feet away. It's the width of this doorway. How close is that to someone who is holding a firearm with one in the chamber pointed at the officer?
Where was that part?
And then finally,
where was the pointed at
the
the
autopsy report supports the evidence that I've gone over here. The coroner refuted the idea that Hinton was shot from behind. She found that the bullet entered straight from the left side.
But it was posterior, which means towards the back.
So we've gone through our role, the legal requirements of this analysis, the events leading up to the incident. We looked at the gun and why we know it belonged to Ryan. We looked at the incident itself. Now we're going to go into the analysis. And the analysis is where we apply the law to the facts of the case. And again, I mentioned this before, the required perspective is that of a reasonable officer on the scene. And again, we have to stand in the officer's shoes and look through what we think were the officer's eyes and perspective and what was within the limits of the officer's knowledge. Again, we have to be objectively reasonable, and we listed out some of these. Severity of the crime, warnings of officers ignored. Was there a chase involved? Was a suspect armed? Was there an immediate threat of safety? And continuing, it's clear that Hinton's conduct indicates the nature and level of the threat he posed either to the officer or others because he ignored the officer's commands, he ran from police, he stopped to pick up a fallen weapon, he ran with the gun in the direction of the officer, he glanced at the officer with the gun in his hand, and he pointed the gun in a bladed manner at Officer A. And when I use the phrase bladed, that's just a colloquialism for when you're running in one or posed in one direction.
So this is the bladed manner. She talking about he was running and arched his body towards him. But his body was obviously arched the opposite direction. So how is that bladed towards the officer?
But you turn your body. You can Google it just like I did. And there's also a part of this calculus of reasonableness that acknowledges that police officers are often forced to make split-second decisions in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. And look, we went through frame by frame by frame over several minutes. This officer had just about that much time. And our conclusion: under the law, the evidence shows that it was objectively reasonable for Officer A to perceive that Hinton posed a serious threat of imminent harm. Under the law, the evidence shows that it was objectively reasonable for Officer A to perceive that Hinton posed a serious threat of imminent harm to him and to others. When Hinton popped out through the dumpsters, moving toward Officer A with a gun in his hand, the applicable law and evidence indicate that Officer A was reasonable in his fear of harm. This shooting was justified. I'll now take questions, and if you don't mind,
if he was scared and you know he had a gun, why you go jump out in front of him?
And I'll have a drink of water.
And shoot him while he going the opposite direction.
Oh, but, all right.
Go ahead, David. Oh, okay, thanks. Glad you were going to ask me. Can you tell us why you chose to not have the BCI look into this as opposed to you doing the investigation with your investigators and taking the Cincinnati Police Department's investigation?
Sure. BCI does not always get involved in things like this. They help jurisdictions that don't have their own coroner's lab. They help jurisdictions that don't have the resources to have a full-fledged investigation. So we can do that on our own.
Butler County just had an officer-involved shooting. They immediately deferred to BCI, so it would not be perceived as any kind of a skewed investigation.
That's fine. I know the prosecutor up there, Mike Moser, very well. That's how he does it. I do it this way.
What was this decision not to take it to a grand jury?
Well, this is our fourth officer-involved shooting, and I've not taken any of them to a grand jury. I can't say that it will never happen in my tenure, but right now we were able to make the decision because of the evidence presented to me, and I feel very confident that I did that in accordance with the law and with what the actual facts revealed.
From Hinton's family, can you speak a little bit about how the officers are doing?
No.
Are they okay?
When I was at the scene, I responded to this shooting along with 4 other assistant prosecutors, and I did ask the officers there if the Officer A was okay, and they said he was doing well. But I don't have his number, so I'm not going to call him, and that's not appropriate for me to. Yes?
Yeah, your review concluded yesterday. I know the officer returned back to work several weeks ago. Before this review was completed, is there anything that you would say in terms of changing that policy just to make sure that your office has a chance to clear these officers and make sure that they are justified before they are back out on the streets and armed?
That is a question for the Cincinnati Police Department. I am not their lawyer. I don't tell them how to do their job. I don't write their rules and procedures. That's their internal policy.
What do you say to people who still watch the video online and say Ryan Hinton was running away? What do you say to the public who's going to be watching this?
Well, when you watch a video in split-second time through a distorted wide-angle lens, people could reach lots of different conclusions, which is why I did not hasten in any way to jump to a conclusion. We took our time. I had my top 4 criminal lawyers working on this with me, and that's why we went frame by frame. And of course, We have the law that I'm required to follow, that of a reasonable officer in the situation of the moment, knowing what that officer knows. I am required by law to make the decision I made.
Did you determine that the officer...
She's required by law to make the decision she made? That don't even make sense. You required by law to make the decision you made. In that case, it's not a decision.
was threatening... Excuse me. Did you determine that the suspect was threatening the officer, or did you determine that there was a threat because he had the gun and could have used it in the future?
Well, there are two possible scenarios, and they both are valid in this situation. If Hinton had not used the gun on the officer, he could have escaped and used it on someone else pretty easily. But the real...
Now she's saying he a threat to society. He was going to kill somebody because he had a gun.
The issue here is, what would a reasonable officer think seeing a young man running at him with a gun like this, running towards him, the feet away from the...
I guess it depends on his skin color, huh?
This, look at the width of this door. We all know how big an apartment complex dumpster could be. We've seen them for years. This is how big it is. That is right there. And there is no time for us to have an extended analysis of this. We have to do it in accordance with the law, which is with what the officer knows to be true at the moment. Yes?
That's the last question. If you guys have questions, go ahead, Cameron. One more.
You've had 4 officer-involved shootings in the last 6 months, less than that amount of time. Has there been any common threads throughout any of this? Is there anything that you think kind of connects these, or any not that they're all the same reason they happened, but is there anything that's common throughout them?
Yeah, there's something that's common. They all wear the same badge and same colors. They a gang. So this should be a RICO, right?
I can't say that there's anything common throughout other than they were tense situations. In 2 of them, one in Columbia Township and one in the city, I can't remember which neighborhood it was in, but it appeared there from what we saw that the person holding the gun was charging right at the officers in a very deliberate and intentional way, almost as if they were welcoming being shot, and one of them was. So, but these are all difficult situations. They're all hard cases, and we have to take them with a case-by-case situation.
What up, no one? Chloe said it's a RICO law.
A quick question about Mordecai Black.
No, he's in the court system right now. I can't.
Following up on Cameron's question, have you given any consideration to some policies that neighboring counties have to take every police-involved shooting to a grand jury?
Well, I have done that. I've looked at Butler County, talked to Warren County, who David Fornchell had an officer-involved shooting in May of his very first term. I think we have a little bit of a difference of style, and for me, because I have some resources, the CPD has resources, and I have a staff that I think is well prepared for this, we're doing it this way.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Each day, we recommit ourselves to this mission, and we will never allow evil to win. I've been clear in my call for the hiring of more officers. We need more boots on the ground to meet the demands of public safety. I am very thankful that City Administration has fully supported this need, allowing us to host a new academy class each year, bringing on board recruits who are eager and ready to serve. Let me reassure our community, we are not compromising patrol. We will not reduce visibility where it matters most, on your streets, in your neighborhoods. This is not the time to celebrate statistics, even as we acknowledge meaningful progress. So far this year, shootings have decreased by 26%, a significant step forward. But let's be clear, even one victim is one too many. I want to speak to you especially about the horrific murder of Mr.
Ryan Hinton.
a crime that shook many of us to our core. That sanctuary was shattered. As a wife, a mother, and a grandmother, I am sickened by this act, not only because of its brutality, but because it reflects a deeper and growing disregard for human life across your Cincinnati Police Department. Like many of you, I find myself again asking why, and sometimes there's no answer that will ever make sense.
Even like, if that was the case, he could have went to jail for that. Like, nothing that was going on at that time of his death. If he would have went to jail, like when he went to court.
I'm sure you know, but if you don't, this is his mother right here, finally speaking out about how she feel about the whole thing.
It wasn't gonna
Y'all
be,
hit that like button.
oh, we're gonna give you life in prison.
Hit that like button, hit that subscribe. Appreciate you, family.
Or we're gonna give you the death penalty for this. Or you're gonna get even an outrageous amount of time. Like, being in a stolen car that they're allegedly saying was stolen, that's a misdemeanor. Having a gun, he just turned 18, that's probational. So he didn't deserve that. And that should be the bigger picture. Like, no matter if that was the case, like, okay, he wasn't gonna die behind that. He wasn't going to go to jail for longer than 2.5 years for that. I would rather be sitting here struggling to put money on his books, money on his phone, commissary, whatever the case may be, than to have start a GoFundMe or get lawyers or to be sitting here talking about that. Because no matter what outcome comes about, I'm without my son behind a stolen car. Like, it ain't that I don't care, but I don't care what he did. He didn't do nothing to deserve it. He wasn't robbing no bank. He wasn't shooting up a school, because school shooters be in jail. School shooters. He wasn't shooting up a school, because school shooters be in jail. School shooters that's killing kids. The church shooter, y'all took him to Burger King. But y'all killed my son for being in a stolen car. It makes no sense to me. This is not a lesson that I want anybody to learn. Because it should never end up like this.
We can only hope that this individual will never have the chance to commit such harm again. The fact that he was able to commit this crime is deeply troubling. Although he served more than 9 years in your Cincinnati Police Department in prison, his actions clearly show he was not prepared to re-enter society. This raises difficult and important questions I am committed to addressing as your chief. When our officers work so diligently to apprehend dangerous offenders, we must be able to trust that the criminal justice and judicial systems will take the necessary steps to ensure continued oversight of individuals who pose an ongoing threat to public safety? These are questions that demand answers from our correctional system, our judicial system, and our social service partners. When we arrest and charge violent offenders, it is only one part of the public safety puzzle. There must be clear policies and procedures in place to manage law enforcement and to ensure they are held accountable to the conditions of their post-release supervision. That responsibility cannot rest on the shoulders of the Cincinnati Police Department alone. In closing, I am not here today to justify or minimize the pain we're all feeling. I'm here to say we must act. Let's stand together, residents and officers alike, to create the future our city deserves. Let this be the moment we strengthen our partnerships and collaboration, not in grief, but in purpose. Let's fix what's broken. Your Cincinnati Police Department.
Welcome to Flesh of the Gods.
Correct. No indication. Let me be very direct. We cannot allow individuals to flee from officers with a loaded firearm aimed at them. When this happens, the outcome is almost always tragic. No one wins, and everyone involved is affected. As I review the sequence of events from yesterday, you'll see exactly how rapidly these things evolve. This is at the dead end of the parking lot back here. You'll see vehicles there now. You'll see a photo of the stolen car that we're going to talk about was backed into a parking spot back there.
All right, family. Appreciate
As you can see, this is a stolen Kia. It was stolen out of northern Kentucky yesterday.
That's gonna be it for tonight. Shout out to everybody in the chat. FFS, what up? I see you, family. Chloe Albert's Revenge, I see you. Appreciate you joining. What up, No One? What up? What up? Tat Clouds, tat, tat, tat. Appreciate you, family. Chamar Black is golden. Much love, much love. Steph JK, what up? Appreciate you tapping in. It's been a while. Good to see you. Lady L, what up, though? Appreciate you, family. Tat, tat, tat. Jazzy T, shout out to y'all. Appreciate y'all. Shout out to Late Night Bacon with Mookie Mookie. Shout out to Cha Diggy. And other than that, I'll see y'all on the next one, family. Until next time, stay fresh and stay blessed. Peace out. FFS said, one more, I got you, fam. I got you. If I can find it.
We have the 2 uniformed cars. We have 2
Sweetie! You saw.
All 4 individuals get out and start running, some in different directions. So officers decide which individual they're going to pursue. One officer decides to pursue the individual who we now know had a firearm in his hand. The other officer pursued another occupant that fled from the vehicle, and that'll be significant here in a moment when you see. So this is a still image. Again, I'm going to step out front. The car is parked over this way, okay? They are chasing the individual. So officer number 1 is chasing this guy right here. Okay, this is the guy we'd ultimately end up shooting. The other officer, who actually fires the shot on this individual, is chasing a different individual further out this way, in this direction. Okay? One officer decides to pursue the individual who we now know had a firearm in his hand. The other officer pursued another occupant that fled from the vehicle, and that'll be significant here in a moment when you see. Okay, this is the guy we'd ultimately end up shooting. Okay, this is the guy we'd ultimately end up shooting. Okay, this is the guy we ultimately end up shooting. The other officer, who actually fires the shot on this individual, is chasing a different individual
further out this way, in this direction. Okay? As this officer is chasing him, he sees a firearm in his hand, and he yells, "Gun, gun, he's got a gun." This individual slips, trips, whatever, falls on the concrete right here. Other officers that were also there, say in their interview, they heard the firearm hit the concrete. They heard the metal from the firearm hit the concrete. This individual gets up, still has the firearm in his hand, and continues to run through the dumpsters. Go ahead, Bobby. This is the firearm that was recovered at the scene after the individual was shot. This is what he had in his hand while the officers were chasing him. Remember I told you he fell on the concrete? The officer said that they heard the metal hit the ground. There are 3 spots on here where this gun has scratches on it. We believe those occurred when he hit the ground with the firearm. This magazine was in the firearm. That's an extended magazine, so it holds more rounds. Go ahead. This is a second magazine that was located in his sweatshirt pocket. So these are some still photos. This is the officer who originally saw him with the firearm in his hand, calling it out. He runs through the dumpsters. This officer knows that there's another officer here that is going to ultimately encounter him when he comes through the dumpsters. So he makes him aware of that. He shouts out to him, "On your right, on your right." He's on your right. And that's where this individual comes out from between the dumpsters. This is the other officer, the one who fires the shot. This is his body camera as he approaches the scene.
There was a third.
Hold on. Somebody said his feet was in the air because he got stuck on the fence. He got stuck. His shirt is stuck on the fence because he was upside down. His feet was in the air. What are you talking about?
There was a third, basically just beneath the skin wound.
If he was jumping the fence and his feet was in the air, he would have fell on the other side of the fence.
And it was in the right posterolateral chest, adjacent to the shoulder, and it was soft tissue only. It traveled beneath the skin and ended just beneath the skull, and we were able to retrieve that.
I was just bullshitting. No, I am about to leave. It's like 3 more minutes. I decided to go ahead and play this.
That bullet.
It fits.
The officer said in police interviews afterwards that during the chase, Hinton had emerged from dumpsters pointing a gun at the officer. The officer said in police interviews afterwards that during the chase, Hinton had emerged from dumpsters pointing a gun at the officer.
Where is the him pointing the gun at him? Where do you see that at?
The coroner said the Hamilton County prosecutor served her a subpoena on Thursday, and she believes that is the first one in the county in 40 years. She's talking to us, the media, anyway, because she says misinformation was being shared.
We wanted to present you with the actual facts and not have conjecture out there with somebody saying this and somebody saying this, and and it's all confusing, and then the tensions are going up. So let me provide you with the actual facts.
Ryan Hinton was laid to rest on Saturday. His funeral was held in Avondale. Now, the coroner would not share when she will appear before that grand jury. That's something I asked her, because that is the next step in this process.
We believe 4 or 5. We believe twice. And I do want to clear up, based on information that we received, the individual was struck in the chest. It exited out the back. He was struck in the arm. We believe it went through his arm and into his side. So those were the two rounds that hit him.
So Mr. Hinton had 3 gunshot wounds to his body. And this is in no particular order, but there was one in the left forearm, and there was an entrance wound and an exit wound, and it was soft tissue injury only. Did not contact any bone, and just skin wounds, entrance and exit. There was a second gunshot wound in the left lateral chest, so underneath the axilla, meaning the armpit, and that one did traverse the chest, and it did traverse through the left ventricle, and it exited the chest near the sternum.
Does that mean he was shot from slightly behind?
No, it was straight from the side. This is mid-lateral side. No, it was recovered from the neck, just below the skull.
So you're saying he was shot in the back?
No, I said he was shot in the right posterolateral near the shoulder.
Posterolateral, the back. Very clearly, the back.
From the ashes he arose. Never hated friend or foes. Just a sub to art and not giving a fuck. Chasing down my goals. I self-law am master. Supernatural disaster. Metaphysical reaction. I am the flesh. I am the God. No one got the lab on lockdown. Talking hot winters and cold summers. Black Force ones when we slide in the streets. We all stay home at a club jumping. What up, cousin? I see you, fam. Throwing slime corners when I watch the trial. LEOs be capping. Chatting action. Come and tap in the most interactive. I am the flesh. I am the God. I am the flesh. I am the God. Tap in, being on flesh skin, every rap in. If you like us, gon' get the lights up. So you can share, tell them pack in. From the left, right, front to the passenger side. It's right here, the premiere. How you know? Cause them boys broadcast to the live. Wanna talk about it, hit the link right here. Slide coins up, got 100 bands. Montage, watch how the check. And the band made love to a bomber head. 2 bands do a dance like check. I'ma keep going till I'm motherfucking tired. You what? I'm motherfucking tired. Slide real side, could we rain down game? Like, what you mean? Just watch the rise. Watch the rise. I am the flesh. I am the God. I am the flesh. I am the God.
Shout out to Rock Solid TV.
I am the flesh. I am the God.